Okay, well, we will get started. Looks like most of the people who registered have joined. Thank you guys so much for joining today. This is Chris Graffinino from CoreCommerce. Most of the people on here know who I am, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of CoreCommerce. And we'll be talking for a few moments today about different tips merchants can use to detect online fraud. Um, I'm sure, as a lot of you know here, fraud is an ever growing problem with e commerce, especially tools like Core Commerce and tools that are similar to it. And so we're just going to discuss first and foremost, I guess, some of the ways that we've noticed on the Core Commerce end how fraud happens. What methods do fraudsters, as we like to call them, use to try to, whether they're trying to steal from you or they're just trying, so we're going to talk about that for just a moment. And then there are some tools that you can do and use to help prevent people doing this kind of stuff to you. So uh, I will take a few minutes here and kind of go through these things. And then at the end, we'll have a little Q&A. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat as we go, and we'll go from there. So moving on to my first slide here is we've noticed, the two main ways that someone will attempt to steal from you via your e-commerce website um, is going to be obviously credit card related fraud. So there's really two goals of someone who's trying to steal from you in that way. And either they're trying to steal from you directly, they're trying to use a stolen credit card to buy items from you, get them shipped, and then, keep your items for free. But the more widely used way of fraud that people get victimized by is authorization attacks. And what that is when someone will, whether they do it manually or they write a script, in one way they have a list of stolen credit card numbers and they need a way to verify them or authorize them in some way to confirm that they're legitimate cards, not for the purpose of necessarily stealing from you directly, but for reselling those cards online or to make money off the list that they have. And so, when you see this happen, you may, if you've ever been a victim of this on your website or anywhere else, you might see hundreds, if not thousands, of authorizations, and they may just be for a penny a piece or a dollar a piece. But the point of it is, this person has this list of 5,000 credit cards, for example, wants to figure out how many of these cards actually are active and can be used, and then at that point will be able to take that list, verify it, send it off, and sell it to someone for a high price. And then that person will do whatever they're going to do with those cards, and that's why it gets circulated around the world. But we've noticed that's by far the biggest use case of credit card fraud online is for that purpose. Now, at a much lower level, but still something to constantly review and deal with, is people just using a stolen credit card just to simply buy from you because they want your products. They don't want to pay for them, so they buy them with a stolen credit card, knowing that the card holder will eventually do a chargeback or something along those lines. And then, of course, you lose the money from that purchase. You've already shipped them the items. You're kind of out those items, right? So um, those being the two really main ways that we've seen that people can do this. So moving on to my next slide here, there's a few things that can be done to potentially combat how this works. The first one is in your payment processor, we'll typically have some tools that you can enable for address verification. So for example, in Core Payments, or if you've used Authorize.net or Nmi as your actual gateway application, you can go into that tool and enable certain settings. For example, if their address matches the card on file, but the 5-digit zip code does not match for some reason, then decline the charge. You can turn on various settings like that and make them as strict or non-strict as you want, or leave them off, right? But if you leave them off, you open yourself up to, it doesn't really care if the billing address entered by the customer matches what's on the card. It's going to approve it if the card's good. But if you turn on some of these settings, it at least forces, for example, the billing address to match the billing address of the actual cardholder account itself, and it will decline the card otherwise. That's one, and usually, in most cases, it's free to turn on some of those settings. With some payment processing, that they charge a small extra monthly fee to do that kind of stuff. But in most cases, you can get the basic address verification for free. Another way you can do this is if you are able to determine the IP address of the person who's doing all these authorizations somehow. Sometimes you're able to do that, sometimes you're not. You can notice that if all the orders are coming from the same IP address, you obviously could go block that IP address and prevent them from accessing your store any further. If that doesn't work, a lot of times what fraudsters will do is they'll write scripts that run, and that's why you're getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of charges within a couple of hours. It's just a script running charges, but it's also spoofing its own IP address, right? So it's confusing the world as to where it's located. So that way you don't really have a single IP address that you could use to block someone. So that's the trick that fraudsters will use to get around blocking an IP address. More importantly, they would rather you not know where they really are, not necessarily so that you'll block their IP as much as now I just don't know where you are in the world, so I can't hopefully get caught, I guess is the real main reason why they would do that. But it also has the side effect of you can't block somebody's IP address if you don't know what it is, right? Now, if you do know an IP address, or in some cases, if you don't, some systems have tools called velocity thresholds. And what a velocity threshold is it's basically just keeping tabs of how many orders, how many charges on coming through your processor within a certain amount of time, and it will put a limit. So you can tell it, for example, if you know on an average day you do 10 orders an hour, you can say don't ever allow more than 20 orders an hour or 30 orders per hour or something along those lines. Because if you got to that number, you would consider it abnormal and potentially, a potential fraud attack. So you can set things like that to just limit the speed in which they can do things. And a lot of times, fraudsters will get frustrated with that and just move on to someone else. And so that's a way you could potentially do things as well. Monitoring orders, of course, the more traditional way of potentially seeing fraud is if you see an order come in and it's 3 times as much as any other order you would normally get, or it's, here's $3,000 worth of merchandise all of a sudden being asked to be shipped to Turkey or something like that, right? So those kind of red flags would pop up to you and give you something to look at to go, well, is this order legit or not? And that brings me to my last slide on this, is going to just be some other tools you could potentially use that help to prevent or to mitigate fraud orders. If you're in the middle of being attacked, you can turn stuff like this on. One option is a plugin that CoreCommerce has called Signified. And what Signified does is they have, I believe, a free service, and then they have a paid service, which is, I think, maybe $20 a month. And so what they do is it's fraud scoring, right? So they'll take the details of the person who's ordering, their billing address, shipping address, email address, and they'll send it through all of their data that they have to try to find out as much about this person, who they say they are, online as possible. And they'll go through things like they'll see if there's a Facebook profile associated with that email address. And if so, does the name on that Facebook profile match the name of the person who's ordering? Other social media outlets. It'll look online for that name to see if this email address or anything is on any potential fraud watch lists or anything like that. And so what Signify does is they'll go through, they'll do all that work, and then they'll return a fraud score back to CoreCommerce. So what will happen is you'll put an order in your CoreCommerce store, and then you'll see on the screen on the side, you'll have a fraud score if your signified plugin is enabled. And the fraud score might be 500, it might be 800. It's a scale from 0 to 1,000. 1,000 being the perfect score, 0 obviously being terrible. So it'll even flag it as kind of a red light, yellow light, green light type concept. So if you get a fraud score, I believe, of under 500, it'll flag it in red. And I want to say 500 to 700 is yellow, and then anything above 700 is green. And essentially what that means is if you get a green light, Signified is basically giving you the thumbs up, the all go, it's okay to ship this order. We are really confident that this person is who they say they are, and this is not fraud. If it's yellow, it might be okay, but check into it a little bit. And red signified to basically saying, we would not recommend you ship this order out, void this charge, don't ship this out. This is most likely a fraud order. And on the free service, they'll provide all that to you, and then you make the decision for yourself on how to move forward. On their paid plan, they take it one step further. They'll provide you with up to, I believe the number is $1 million worth of insurance, which means essentially what it means is if they give you a green light on an order, let's say a customer places an order and they give you a score of 800 and it's green, and you're like, okay, green light, I'm going to ship it. And come to find out they were wrong, and it actually was fraud, they'll recoup you the cost of that order up to, I believe, $1 million in just kind of insurance. It's not like life insurance for your order, I guess, if you want to think of it like that. But so that was a really cool tool. I know a couple customers that use it every single day. A couple of our larger customers that take hundreds of orders a day use it all the time, and it really helps them to prevent, if somebody places a $3,000 order worth of equipment, prevent them from sending it to, Canada or sending it to Europe. And the way that kind of stuff works is, once you send stuff overseas, as you guys are probably already aware, it's a lot harder to get it back and recoup your money versus if you just ship something from, California to Florida. It's a lot simpler to get something like that back than if you shipped from California to, Japan or China or Pakistan or even just the UK. Just much with customs, it's much more challenging. So it's a good tool to have, and it works really well. And the customers I know that use it are very, very happy with how it helps them prevent them from shipping out orders that they should not ship out. The second thing on this list you notice is I Spy fraud. It's a feature of the Nmi Gateway, which is one of the gateways that Core Payments works with. And so if you're a Core Payments member, you may have access to Nmi right now as far as your current virtual terminal to review charges, void charges, refund charges, if you ever have to do that. But I Spy fraud is an add-on within Nmi that will do a lot of the same things that Signified does. There's an extra monthly cost onto it. So if you're a Core Payments member already, I Spy fraud is something you could bolt on to your account right now if you feel you need to do so. If you're not on Core Payments, then let me know that too, because we'd love to talk to you about switching if we aren't already in discussions with you. But then we can go into more detail about what I Spy fraud actually does. And it does a lot of the same things Signified does as far as just trying to validate that the person placing the order is who they say they are by many different means. And a lot of them are, I'm assuming, is very similar to what Signified does. And there's actually a video that talks about what I Spy fraud does, and I will include that link in our follow-up email here at the end of this presentation. And lastly, we talked about AVS options a little earlier, but enabling your AVS options. And I would recommend everybody, whether you're using Core Payments or you're using Nmi or Authorize.net or whoever you're using right now, I would always recommend going in and if you're not doing any type of AVS filtering, to do it. It's just going to protect you. It's not, I think sometimes you can get a little leery or scared that it's going to start blocking legitimate orders and legitimate customers from placing orders. And most of the time that's not. You just got to find the right balance of what's too strict versus what's just strict enough, versus what's way, you know, not strict at all, and then, you open yourself up for the potential fraudsters that you were dealing with. So um, hopefully this helped. Now this is our first webinar, so thanks for bearing with me as we get used to doing these weekly. We'll be doing these every single week at 10 a.m. Central Time. And so you'll get another email on Thursday letting you know what the next webinar is going to be about, and feel free to register for any of them. I hope to see everyone who is in here for every webinar. That would be awesome if we could do that. But that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to see if anybody had any questions about anything. Feel free to put them into the chat at this point. I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm going in, just pulling up the Q&A now to see if anybody has any questions. And this was a short topic. I understand you may not have any, and that's totally fine as well. Does anyone have any questions at all? I see the message. Mike, thank you for that so much. Yeah, more than happy to do a webinar about taxes. Did you have any specific topics within taxes that you wanted to discuss? When will our new system be available? Are you talking about like a tax cloud? Yep, yep. So we're working on something now, and we'll do a whole webinar about this, Mike. You got it. I'm more than happy to do that. But just to answer your question real quick, we are currently now working on an integration with a company called TaxJar, and that's what they do. It's online SaaS cloud, so you can get away from kind of calculating tax on your own, and it will support economic nexus. They'll file your state taxes for you. They'll keep track of all the different state regulations and when you need to be charging in each state and when you don't be, and things of that nature. So that's what TaxStar is going to do. And we're in the middle of building that now. So I'm hoping within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be able to start pushing out TaxStar to all of our customers. Yeah, I'm very excited about it too, because as you know, Mike, I'm sure you already understand this, and everybody on this call already probably understands, is that the CoreCommerce built-in tax system it was designed way before economic nexus was a thing. So it was never really designed for you to try to collect tax in all 50 states. And if you've tried to use it that way, it has a little, some quirks to it that we need to get rid of. So the goal is to eventually phase out the built-in tax tool and have everybody using an online tool that supports all of these thousands of rules. If tax wasn't complicated enough already, now they just made it even 10 times worse. So having partners like this that support and do all the tax stuff themselves for a living is where we want to go with this. It's just kind of like very similar to shipping, just that things always change. But great question, Mike. I'll be happy to do a tax webinar. Did anyone else have any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'll assume everybody enjoyed this webinar. Please feel free to let me know if you do come across any other questions. My email address, I'm putting it in the chat right now. Most of you already know who I am and how to get in touch with me, but that is my email address there. Feel free to email me with any other questions that you may have about this topic or anything in general, and we'll go from there. And if you have any suggestions about any webinar topics you'd love us to cover, send them to me, and we're more than happy to do webinars on any topic that you're interested in. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar out now. I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. And like I said, we enjoyed it. We'll be doing this every week, and looking forward to seeing a lot of you here all next week. And any other questions, reach out to us, and we're happy to get back to you right away. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.